What I want is for common sense to be common, for logic and reason to be taught to our children, because they're going to need it when they face another Osama bin Laden or whatever life brings. The Greeks called it the mobile mind. Howard Gardner of Harvard calls it the agile mind. And I'll say to you that however you get there, you must be taught an agility of mind that can dance around and take care of whatever problems comes at us from whatever source. And if we're not taught that, we have no reason to be taught anything. And if we're not taught to punish the guilty and to indict the guilty and to raise up and praise heroes, what are we doing? We're spending a lot of money, and now we're spending a lot of money sending our kids to college, knowing that when they graduate, they can't get the jobs they want. So right now, we're living in a kind of common senselessness. And we're thinking that there's nothing we can do. We don't have the right to ask questions. We don't have the right to outrage. We don't have the right to hold accountable those who are accountable. If 8,000 members of the Bank of America quit in 1 month a year ago and say, we're not going to do this illegal thing and write and sign our names to the illegal foreclosure of your homes because our soul is on the line. 8,000 people said that. And what happened to the Bank of America? Nothing. When Katrina happened and a natural disaster hit an American city for the first time in our history, we turned our back on that city. I was living in Europe, and the Europeans have about 1,000 years on us about how to oppress the poor. They're really good at it. But they looked at us in awe at what we didn't do. We never said, drop bottles of water on the roofs. Tell them where to go. Open up your department stores and invite people in from out of the cold and rain. Instead, we hired security guards and told people to stay out. For the first time in our history, we had never done that before. We are a Republican democracy. And sooner or later, there is an inescapable definition, which is that we are willing to share space with those with whom we disagree. We are not willing anymore. We are not sharing anything. We are, through incivility, interrupting one another and holding one another in contempt and patronizing and yelling and screaming. And let me tell you that civility is more than manners. Civility is the oxygen that is required by any democracy, or else it will die. We must raise up civility as the norm of public discourse. We must raise up dissent as acceptable behavior, especially because we were founded by dissenters. We must be willing to debate issues. We must be willing to trust our children and those who teach them, and not hold the teachers accountable for what legislators do without the input of teachers, and impose on the education process a completely unrealistic and completely irrelevant set of testings.
Amen.
We teach to the test, we don't teach to the subject. We don't teach the subjects that we need. Those that we need, and I say need, we don't create in our children a smarter generation than ours, so that right now you can say that Steve Jobs, a pretty smart guy, might be the end of the line. If we don't get smarter, there'll be no one to buy his product. And I say, there's much that we can do, and many whom we should punish, and many that by punishing will make us feel better, because we live with a sense of injustice and unbalance. We live with a sense of unease about the future of our nation, which is completely different than at any other time in our history. We always felt certain and secure that we in somehow, some way, owned the future. We don't feel that now at all, because the void created by not teaching civics is filled by what is called politely special interests. And that's another word for thieves, who make no distinction between stealing from fellow Americans or anyone else. Business schools in this country used to teach three things: profit, excellence of product, and protection of the workforce. Now they teach profit, profit, and profit. They stopped teaching protection of the workforce when they moved the workforce to Bengal. And when they found a cheaper workforce than Bengal, they moved to Ecuador. And who teaches the Ecuadorians? The Bengalese. The Americans are out of the loop. If you want America to prevail, you have to have a smart America. Right now, we pass up and out of school people who cannot read or write. If we don't take care, America as we know it will be an anecdote. It will be a memory by the time my grandchildren are old enough to vote. And when we tell them what it used to be like, they will laugh at us that we were ever so naive as to think that anyone had that kind of power or freedom. And if you think that I'm exaggerating in any way, please raise your hand. All right. You know it, and I know it. Now it's a question of doing. For some reason, having to do with being ignorant, because we're not taught things, we feel unempowered, and we feel that we have no right to solve the problem. But we can solve this problem. Scott and I are completely at opposite ends of the political spectrum. He is a conservative Republican. I am an independent, former liberal, former red, former communist. We know one thing, and that is that we share the values of the Enlightenment upon which all Americans have stood for 250 years. We are the only nation ever to have the courage to actually actualize those values. And from that strong foundation, we can disagree with one another to our heart's content. Without those values taught, and without the rules and regs of civics taught, all we're doing is yelling and screaming at one another, allowing us to mistake statesmanship for those who can say, a soundbite of 8 seconds without or America is tough. America is hard. America requires from its population more than any other theory of governance has ever asked. And in exchange, we have become the admiration of the world until quite recently. We don't have it now, and we have to and should get it back. People talk about American exceptionalism. I don't want to hear any talk about American exceptionalism. I want to see it. I want to see the action. We've done many, many things that are so wonderful and have gifted mankind so much, and now we talk like records. So I went to Oxford in 2004 to learn about what was missing and how to get it back. And I was a senior, what they call a senior advisory research member of St. Anthony's College. And then when I came back, at a certain point, I met Scott, because we were both members of Hallowed Ground and the Preservation of Civil War Sites. And after an hour of talking, we parted. And in less than a week, he had sent me an email with comments and critiques and ideas. And I wrote back, I think I've been waiting for you for 7 years. And I will not allow this country to kill itself. Abraham Lincoln said, the only one who could ever defeat us is us. Not in my lifetime. And I'm getting older. And I'm falling apart. I'm like the wonderful one-hoss shay. And I'm telling you, this is more important than any partisan victory or defeat. It is more important than any other issue. There is no other issue as important as making sure that our kids are equipped with the sharpest of minds and the sharpest of intellects, because that's what they're going to need. So that's what I do.